theory, which is, does it empower families? I think the answer is correct, is incontestable. And I'd like to just conclude by quoting from an amicus brief that was filed in a Wynn case. And this was filed by Professor John Coons, Jack Coons at the University of Berkeley Law School, retired. This is the fellow, along with Stephen Sugarman, who were the Serrano versus Priest case was their brainchild. In other words, they are Professor Tractenberg's parallels out in California, which when I was in law school was known as fruit and nut land. Parental choice in education is constitutional, sensible, and just. What's more, it is essential to achieving equality of opportunity for American children, rich or poor. School choice treats the poor as citizens of equal dignity. It promotes the independence upon which constitutional government depends, and it empowers parents to transmit their values to their children. I'll end it.
We will now begin our rebuttal period. Professor Trachtenberg will have 7 minutes.
I thought that Dick Komer's comment about my finding everything he said to be hooey was rhetorical, but I'm not so sure. Let me address just a couple things. Pierce is the key case. I agree. The key mandate, Supreme Court, for parental choice and parental rights. Nowhere in Pierce is there any utterance of words suggesting that the choice is to be publicly subsidized. So Pierce is fine as far as it goes. It doesn't go nearly as far as to reach where from Voucher people are going. In fact, in New Jersey, we had the case of Crawford against Davey, which lost unanimously at the appellate division, arguing that there was an entitlement to vouchers because the Abbott remedies weren't working. So students who were in, quote, failing schools were entitled to a better remedy than improved public schools, a different remedy. That was a loser. Let me go to what I think is a core assertion and a core error. I don't want to misquote, so I'll try to convey the gist. That somehow, if choice were introduced into urban schools, the results would be the same as the best suburban schools. Now, that involves something that's got a bit of complexity, but let me get into it. There's no question, I mean, there's not a researcher in the world who would disagree with the proposition that the strongest predictor of standardized test scores is socioeconomic status. So unless you address socioeconomic status, give me a break to argue, you know, the scores in a low-income community are going to be the same as the scores in the highest wealth, most advantaged socioeconomic community in New Jersey. All we need to do is introduce choice and competition, and boom, the wand will be waved. And all we know about socioeconomic status and standardized test scores will be eradicated. It doesn't happen. I think we have an obligation to provide every student with a high-quality education. In some places, it's going to be in the public schools, and I think we're doing that. Incidentally, Jack Coons and I are good friends. I know a lot about Serrano. I have a manuscript entitled A Tale of Two States, comparing New Jersey and California. Just to fast forward it, California has, as a result of Serrano and Proposition 13, absolutely gone down the education tubes. California's performance, students across the board, high wealth, college graduate children, is grouped at the bottom of the country with Louisiana, Mississippi, and Guam. So that's what Serrano brought California. So, and Jack Coons and I have had a lot of arguments about the difference in our legal theories that I think triggered that. the California court said about equal protection as it was argued in Serrano, well, you know, that would mean as long as everybody got the same quality of education, equal protection would be satisfied, even if everybody got a marginal education or a clearly inadequate education. That's all that equal protection buys. Equally poor, as it turns out in California, and equally low funded. California spends about half what New Jersey does. Their class sizes are about twice what New Jersey's are. So, although Jack Coombs is a friend of mine, I will not accept that we are somehow soulmates and we were pursuing the same result in the same way. Let me just say a couple of things about, because Dick said at one point, well, the urban schools in New Jersey, like every place else, we have, thanks to Abbott, high quality, full day preschool for all 3- and 4-year-olds in New Jersey, in the Abbott districts. And indeed, the state would like to extend that to all, at least low-income kids throughout the state. Everywhere it's held up as a national model of what we should be doing. We have a variety of supplemental and wraparound programs, actually much like and earlier than the Harlem Children's Zone, which is widely touted as being so innovative. We did it in the public schools here. We have curriculum reforms starting at the early grades, early literacy, working their way up now to the middle schools and high schools. We have a program unknown in the country in which every urban school will be upgraded, renovated, or replaced. Now, at the hands of our state, it's turned into a fiscal and probably ethical and legal nightmare. But that's not the fault of the court that ordered Abbott or the people who pressed for it. New Jersey is widely recognized as a national leader in early childhood, and I have cites. New America Foundation issued a report in 2009. It consistently has the highest student achievement and high school graduation rates in the country. It has substantially closed the achievement gap between urban and suburban students and between black and white students. I don't have time to go into details, but I recommend Linda Darling Hammond's book called The Flat World in Education, How America's Commitment to Equity Will Determine Our Future, and her statement that New Jersey is arguably now, quote, the highest achieving state in the nation. There's a lot more where that comes from. However, Abbott and its funding levels, its breakthroughs programmatically and otherwise are under siege. We have an underfunded School Funding Reform Act, which was accepted as constitutional by our court a year ago on the express condition that it be fully funded. It's not fully funded. It's back in court. I won't prejudge the result. But clearly, if we care about education, this doesn't seem a time to divert funds from the public schools. And the Opportunity Scholarship Act diverts them. 25% of all the money, and it will total over 5 years, $360 million, can go to students who are already in private school, who are not in public school. In many cases have never spent a day in public school. So give me a break. Is this saving kids from failing public schools? It's subsidizing kids who've already chosen private schools. Look, I have 4 grandchildren who are in private school because of a matter of religious belief. And my son and daughter-in-law pay for it and are not out there parading for vouchers. Now, granted, there are people who can't afford it. And we'd love for the world to be equal in every particular. But I think the more logical way to proceed is by investing our time and effort and energy and resources in improving public schools. Because we have a network of public schools we know that works. I don't know where the idea of gold standards supporting that vouchers produce better results came from, but here's a recent research report. Summary and conclusions. While the debate about academic outcomes will undoubtedly continue, it is impossible to make an honest and compelling argument that private schools in general are boosting academic achievement in any significant or sustained manner. In fact, it may be that they have a negative impact on academic achievement, in some instances. This is a recent study by two well-known and independent researchers, and I stress the words independent, because if you see the name Paul Peterson or his acolytes Jay Green or Patrick Wolf, you know what the result is going to be. It's going to be, quote, the gold standard suggesting vouchers and charters always produce better results. And I'm here to say that's not the way I read the academic research literature. It's not what I have seen independent researchers to say. So I think this is just it's a very perilous time for the public sector. Look, this is about ultimately privatization. And we see where privatization has taken hold, and you can be the judge of whether it's worked. We've seen the privatization of military support services. We've seen the privatization of prisons. We've seen the attempted privatization of Social Security. This is about follow the money, and the entrepreneurs are not far behind. You know, why are billionaire hedge fund managers suddenly enamored of charter schools? It's because where the money is. And be clear on this, privatization means private, for-profit individuals and entities want to latch on to public dollars. It's not about privatization in the sense that the private sector is going to pay for this. They want the public sector to pay for it. They just want to be the recipients of the public dollars rather than to have public agencies that are accountable to the public. And accountability doesn't always work perfectly, I'm the first to tell you, but it works a lot better than, you know, I just heard another instance of privatization. 5 years ago, we apparently privatized the mortgage record business, right? We used to, if you got a mortgage, you had to take a piece of paper and record it in a court or a county hall of records. 5 years ago, it went private, and it went electronic. And now, lo and behold, what happened? We can't seem to track down who actually owns mortgages, because there's some cyberspace record, and we don't seem able to find it. So privatization is hardly a panacea anywhere. And I think in education, it seems to me it has the least possible traction. And if we're serious about wanting to provide all our students with a good education, and let me just end with a statistic. In New Jersey, there are 1.37 million students in public schools. There are about 160,000 in private schools. So a little less than 12%. To the extent we're talking about ultimately a voucher program that extends to 160,000 more students, we're either talking about enlarging the pie dramatically for what we spend on education, or cutting it up into a lot more pieces, which mean each of them is going to be smaller. Now, I haven't yet seen anything that says, you know, it's a good deal. Would you buy this? You know, you're educating a child for $15,000 to $17,000 a year in a public school, and you're told, well, don't worry, we'll give you a $6,000 to $9,000 voucher, and you'll get a much better education for your child. I want to look pretty closely at that before I bite, but that's exactly what the deal is. So my feeling is this is not the time to experiment on something which has limited or no upside potential and a huge downside potential. This is the time to redouble efforts to really make sure that public schools, which are, after all, the only place where everybody's assured of an education, is providing a good education to all children, and most particularly those in urban districts. It's kind of a lifeline for a lot of kids in urban districts, and if we don't do right by them, we're going to be very sorry as a society in the future. Thanks.
So I think it is clear we don't agree on much of anything. There's so much there that I don't even know where to start. But one of the things I'd like to mention, since you probably don't realize this, There may be somewhere between 25 and